The Belonger, a novel, written by Kathleen Mehuron, and narrated by Kathleen Hewitt. Chapter 25. By midday, the sky was a brilliant blue, and a gentle trade breeze fanned the island. Holly's front and back porch were strewn with upholstered furniture and linens and pillows baking in the sun. Montez informed Holly that he was going to try to navigate Corliss and Sanford through the flooded streets to their house. Byron was insistent that he join them. This thing of his lately, wanting independence from me, making his own choices, I feel like I can't open my mouth anymore. I'd love for him to stay here and help with the cleanup, but if I say so, he will fight me on it. If I say the sky is blue, he will argue the point. Once we assess the damage and get them situated, we'll move on to Aunt Rosie and Uncle Harold's, Byron told her. Since there's no internet, power, or cell service, can we agree to operate under the assumption that no news is good news? Just take on the next task in front of us and do the best we can? I can try, but I'd like you to keep in mind that your mother is going to worry until you make it back home. That's what mothers do. Holly tried to push Byron out of her mind as she and Anthony readied themselves to check on the older folks who lived closer to Roseate. It turned out Mrs. James, Anthony's childhood nanny, lived just around the corner. Matthias showed up at her front gate just as Holly and Anthony arrived. Mrs. James had taken care of him when he was young as well, and they all hugged as if they hadn't seen each other in a decade. It certainly felt that long. Matthias raised his hands to the blue sky. Hurricane gone. And good riddance, Holly said, smiling. Anthony broke the spirit of the moment when he started pounding on the door. Mrs. James? There's no need to scream, Holly insisted. She pretended to plug her ears as she stood next to him on the stoop of the old stone cottage, which had seen better days. He shot Holly a glance. I'm not screaming, I'm shouting. Mrs. James lost most of her hearing years ago. Holly fell back a step. Once again, I have underestimated the man. The door eased open, and a frail old woman blinked into the sunlight where they stood. She took one look at Anthony and clapped her hands together. She then shook them back and forth above her head in celebration. Oh, Anthony, my boy, I knew you was coming to look for me. You done fall down and get up with me over the years, and now we make it through one more time. Praise the Lord. Thank you, Jesus. He reached out and held her tight. We sure did, Mrs. James. We sure did. As he rocked her, he wiped away a tear from his eye. This is my friend Holly. Mrs. James then hugged her with gusto. Apparently, any friend of Anthony's was immediately okay with her. Anthony's face fell from relief to confusion as he searched for Matthias. He was just saying, "What the hell?" when Matthias came back around the corner from the back of the house. 2 of her windows blew out, the younger man reported. The good news is I found a piece of plywood I can use to mostly cover them. Mrs. James let go of Holly and threw herself around Matthias. Thank you for coming again to help the old woman. You know it's good science, boys. She patted him on the back with both of her hands. Of course, madame, Matthias said. It's how we do it, isn't it? We take care of each other, just as you did when I was a baby. Mrs. James searched his eyes and briefly laid her forehead on his chest. After a few moments, she laughed and pushed him away. Then she took both of Anthony's hands in hers, saying, My boy, my boy, my boy. A lump of emotion grew in Holly's throat, nearly choking her. Looking at Holly over Mrs. James's shoulder, Anthony explained, She was our caregiver, from the time we were born, really. I can't remember my life without her in it, nor do I want to. When he pulled away from Mrs. James, he turned and leaned on the front gate and stared out into the street. He seemed overcome. Something I can totally understand. It's been happening often. I guess this is a normal part of the process. The last few days had been a heaving series of dramas. Mrs. James, Holly said, I own the Roseate house. As you know, it's not far and we've got some extra supplies. Do you need anything in particular? Towels? Sheets?" A slow smile spread across her face. "Towels? Oh yes, thank ya. This weather muck up everything I own. I sure would feel good if I could wipe off my skin." "They'll be clean, but a little damp from the air. We'll hang them out in your backyard in the sun. I'll go get some. Back in a few minutes, and I'll help with—" She gestured to the chaos around them. "All this." Holly waved to Anthony as he ducked back into the alleyway and turned the corner onto Duke Street. Though town was a disaster zone, she wasn't afraid. She had made a decision. Never again will I count on someone to save me, or wait around for a man. From now on, I am in charge of my own life. I am running the show. If someone wants to come aboard and enjoy my company, fine. But I am steering my ship from this point forward. Holding on to one of her welcoming arm stair railings, Holly made her way up into the Roseate. Though she felt like skipping, it was hot already. She looked forward to a few long drinks of water and washing her face again. The front door wasn't locked. She didn't even know where the key to the house was. The previous owner had told her when she bought the place that in all the many years he'd lived there, he'd never needed one. As she wandered through the living room, she thought she heard a noise. She stopped short, listening hard. Her heart raced like mad in her chest. Is it my imagination? The walls of the house could still be shifting. Maybe that's it. Or smaller pieces of stone falling from the roof. There had been so many noises over the last few days. Let's face it, we're all in shock. I'm jumping at every little thing. That's what trauma does. It makes you, what do they call it? Hypervigilant. The need for water was greater than her fear. She went back toward the kitchen, though the hair on the back of her neck was standing on end in warning. 3 young men stood in the dim light. Spotting them, a surge of stress hormones flowed through Holly so powerfully that she thought she might pass out. A strong smell of hard alcohol wafted into her nose, making her snort. When one of the boys saw her, he leered, "We come looking for food, and we find rum. Oh, yeah. Now see what else we find." The 2 other teens shushed him. "Charles, don't," one said. He was the boy who worked in their dive shop, Robert. Holly stared at him. "Robert, what are you doing?" "I tried to stop them," he said weakly. Charles sneered at him. "You drank your share of rum, though." He moved quickly toward her, and her instinct took over. There was no time to waste. She knew exactly where the knife rack was. She leaned into the counter and grabbed a short and very sharp paring knife. Her choice was deliberate. She thought using a short knife instead of a long one might spare the young man's life. He pushed her so hard, her head crashed into the hanging cabinet behind her. Then he asked in his slurred voice, "What you think you gonna do with that?" "I'm going to cut you, you little shit." He laughed as he lunged at her. Having survived a massive hurricane and so much else over the last 43 years, Holly had no intention of letting herself be attacked. In some corner of her brain, she hoped Charles would survive. However, her father had told her years before that if you knock a man down, you better make sure he can't get back up. Though he was little more than a kid, he was more than old enough to hurt her badly. So with all the strength she could summon, she stabbed him in the side of his neck, just as Robert grabbed him from behind, trying to pull him back. Amazingly, the blade only went in half of the way. Charles was stunned silent for a moment, breathing hard. She stared over his shoulder into Robert's eyes as he wrestled with him, her hand still on the blade handle. Charles had shoved her onto the countertop, which was fortunate for her. She released the knife, reached behind her into a canister she kept there, and drew out her Glock 43. She always kept the 9mm pistol loaded just in case. Once again, the choice of weapon was deliberate. The small bullets it used were meant to stop an intruder, but hopefully not kill them. "Stop where you are, boys," Holly said in her best teacher voice. "Do not move 1 inch. I already stabbed Charles. I'm sure you can see that I wouldn't think twice about shooting any of you, and I am an excellent shot. You have to be, when you grow up out in the country like I did. Charles, you have made a terrible mistake picking on me. I have been through too much to put up with anyone's bad behavior. She reached out and pulled the knife out of the boy's neck in one quick movement. Between the gun she held and the sight of blood spurting, the 3 teens did as they were told, though Charles did raise one hand to put pressure on his wound. "Back up," Holly demanded. "Give me some room to get down." He did. "You all right?" He nodded, backing away. With one eye on the trio, she pulled a flashlight out of a drawer. From another, she pulled out a pile of dish towels. She took one off the top and handed it to the injured boy. "Let me see that wound," she ordered him. When he didn't move, she made an impatient gesture, and he removed his hand from his neck. She shone her flashlight on his neck, scrutinized the cut carefully. "I didn't get the jugular vein," she said. "I tried not to, though all I know about physiology I learned from dissecting a baby pig in college. Turns out we're both lucky. You won't die today. It will be sore as hell for a while, but it won't kill you." She ducked down under the kitchen sink and produced some peroxide. She handed it to Charles and looked each boy in the eye as she said their names. "Robert, Charles, Bradleo. I know all of your parents. I know you from church. If you leave now and don't bother us again, we won't talk about any of this for now. But if I hear of a whiff of trouble involving any of you in the coming days, I'm going right to your family. Because I think the police are a little busy right now, I don't want to bother them. But I will if you force me to." The young men had their hands in the air and were backing up toward the front door. She followed them, shouting now, finally feeling her rage. "It's up to you, boys. My friends will be back shortly, and we are more than capable of defending this house. I promise you. If you decide to report me when the army gets here, I doubt you'll get much sympathy. Trespassing was a bad decision. But I don't really want any of you to go to jail. You're still so young. Do you want another chance?" In unison, they said, "Yes, ma'am," and promptly scrambled out the door. She'd never seen anyone move so fast. Chapter 26. Holly had a small stack of folded towels in her arms, and her pistol stuck into the back of her waistband. She honestly didn't know what she would encounter on the way back to Ms. James's house, or when they returned to Roseate later in the day. Best to be prepared, but she didn't plan on telling her friends about what happened, not yet. She had handled the situation for the moment. They were still outside clearing debris when Holly approached Mrs. James's house. As Holly handed her the towels, the old woman pointed to the 2 men in her yard and whispered, as if telling her a secret, "Anthony's my heartstring. I love him too much. He always been a sensitive child, but so loyal. You can't find a more loyal man. He ain't no raft for sure. His poor heart always been tender." She pointed at Holly with great humor. "You now. You take good care of it. I can see he fallen for you." Holly put the palm of her hand to her face. "Me? Oh, yes," Mrs. James said. "You full his eye." When Anthony returned to them, Mrs. James wiped her eyes with one hand as she held onto his arm with the other. "He does take good care of his nanny. The roof's strong, my boy. It hold tight. For what I paid for it, it better have." Anthony winked at her, and it seemed to melt her. She giggled uproariously and made a gesture like she was shooing a fly. Mrs. James told them, "The noise was something, though. I was afraid, but not like when Ike came. This time I didn't think I would kick the bucket. I even sleep for part of it. Holly, how things by the Roseate?" She shrugged. "A bit battered, I'm afraid." Mrs. James's face fell. "Oh, no." "We'll fix her up, we will. Don't you worry, we will manage somehow." Mrs. James clapped her hands together again. "You know, come out the hot sun. Only thing I got here is water. You know, want some water?" She motioned for them to enter through the front door. Inside, she pointed toward 2 chairs in her sitting area. Holly promptly sat down as if she were there on a regular visit, like any other day, but the men set about exploring the other 3 rooms for damage. "Nanny's getting old," Anthony said quietly to Holly after he'd done some recon. "I'm going to clear off the walkways for her. Don't want her to get tripped up on anything." "It will take months before insurance claims are processed and paid out. Building materials are ordered, and workmen make the rounds repairing buildings. For now, I am grateful to be alive, and relatively unharmed by that boy." She was thrilled that Mrs. James had made it through the storm without any injury at all, too. In a half hour, they had her house and yard as secure as it was going to get for a while. "Nanny, we have to see about some of the others, but I'll come back and see you soon." Holly thought the old woman was extraordinarily brave as she cheerily waved goodbye to them from the other side of her gate. Holly's heart sank as she, Anthony, and Matthias reached the Lightbourne family's home, a quarter of a mile down the road. Most of the roof was gone. They began calling to the elderly couple as they hurried their steps. It turned out the Lightbournes were sitting outside on what was left of their back deck, unharmed, although both were wide-eyed and shaking their heads as if they were seriously confused. While Anthony and Matthias took a tour of the building, Holly stayed with them, explaining what she knew about the state of the island, which wasn't very much. "I only have one blue plastic top with me," Matthias told them, "but I can tack it up on the roof to create a temporary cover." All 5 of them had a long discussion. The kitchen was the largest room in the house, and a constant trade breeze blew through the large windows at either end of it. The Lightbournes called it the wind tunnel. By consensus, it was decided since this was the room that had sustained the least amount of damage, they would move their large table out and replace it with the couple's double bed. Holly worked on securing hinges and fasteners that had come loose from the wind, while the men moved the furniture. When they were done, and Holly saw that the Lightbournes were seated on 2 of the kitchen chairs, looking a bit lost, she told them, "You still have room in here for a small table. I've got one in storage. Anthony?" "We'll bring it over this afternoon." The couple nodded by way of response, but still seemed dazed, as if they didn't understand what had happened. Holly went outside and hollered up the ladder to Matthias. "I'm going back to the Roseate to start lunch. When you're done here, come over to take a break and eat." She ran inside to Anthony, who was now helping the Lightbournes clear out some debris. "I'm going to start food," she told him. "Come home when you can." His eyes fixed on hers with such intensity that something stirred inside of her, and that something was quite torrid. Later we can see about that. Anthony swept off his hat and bowed to her. "Will do. And I thank you, fair lady." Holly let out a delighted laugh. "You are such a dork." "Perhaps, but I'm a gallant one. And you are a ravishing woman. Simply ravishing." She casually waved away his compliment, but as she walked out the front gate and toward the Roseate, she couldn't stop smiling. Even so, she reached toward the back of her waistband and felt for her revolver before continuing on. Although it lay upside down, her picnic table had survived the storm. Holly thought it would be wonderful to have a meal al fresco after the many hours they had been closed up inside. She was so pleased by the idea that a burst of adrenaline surged through her, enabling her to hoist the table up onto one end and then drop it onto the ground right side up. One of the boards on the top was cracked, but other than that, it was in perfect condition. Pivoting it to one side and then the other, she moved it closer to the house and into the shade. She went inside, selected 2 packages of thin-sliced pork chops from the freezer, and set them in the sun to defrost. Everything else in the deep chest freezer was still pretty cold, but finally showed signs of thawing. She wondered how much longer it could last. They should make a plan during lunch for giving some of the meat away. Now, how to cook these pork chops? The Weber grill was nowhere to be found, gone the same way of the gas grill that preceded it. I need something fireproof to hold the coals, she thought. As a memory flashed, she jumped up in the air with excitement. There was a huge terracotta planter under the house. In the past, she'd seen chimeras made of terracotta that held outdoor fires. Like those, the planter would probably contain the heat. Some distance from the house, she spotted a mesh grill on top of a pile of debris. She ran over to grab it. Perfect. I can just lay that over the top. Now, the real challenge, moving the giant pot out from under the house. It took some time for her to dig out the potting soil still caked at the bottom of the planter. She hadn't been overestimating the weight. It was heavy. She was drenched in sweat by the time she rolled it outside along its bottom edge, this way and that, in many small steps. It was an unexpected but exciting victory when the grate capped the planter perfectly, as if it had been custom-made for it. Holly got the fire going, then dusted off her hands and bobbed her head in satisfaction. It was nearly 3 o'clock by the time Anthony and Matthias straggled in. They told her they'd gone from the Lightbournes to check on the Inghams and the Rigbys. Although they were ravenous, they told Holly they couldn't bear to sit down and eat without cleaning up first. She fully understood the need. "Grab a towel off the clothesline," she told them. Luckily, the smell of the great outdoors had tamped down the musky odor the hurricane had left behind in the linens. There was a gravity-fed hose from the cistern, and the water was air temperature, so it was lukewarm. In turn, Anthony and Matthias went in and sprayed themselves down. As they cleaned up and changed, Holly finished setting the table. With glowing skin and wet hair, they sat down to a feast for their early dinner. Besides the pork chops Holly had grilled, she had made hash browns using the onions and canned potatoes in the pantry. Determined to use up the last of the fresh vegetables before they turned bad, she also served a cold salad and a hot sauté. No one said a word while they wolfed down what was on their plate. Only the scraping sounds of knife and fork filled the air. Matthias finally joked, "It must be terrible. No one is talking." Holly laughed. "You know, I could live with the quiet for a good long while. After all that ruckus, there's something to be said for silence." Chapter 27. After lunch, they brought the small table to the Lightbournes' house, as promised. The old couple greeted them like they hadn't seen them in ages, but the trio couldn't linger. "We still have a long way to go before nightfall," Anthony told them with a sigh. As she was leaving, Holly looked over her shoulder. The old folks were preparing to enjoy a cup of tea together in the kitchen, on the very table they'd brought them. What a sweet vignette they made together, holding hands. She unlatched the gate to let herself out of the yard. "Get ready. It's going to be a long walk in the hot sun." Anthony wanted to check on the wife of a close friend, Joab, someone Holly knew only peripherally. "Many years ago, we became fishing buddies," Anthony explained. "But we got on so well it grew into a friendship. We're one another's confidants. I'd trust him with my life." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Joab has been away in the Dominican Republic on some business. Goods there are so much less expensive. He and his wife live toward the west side of the island, in Micaiah Point. It's pretty isolated, even by Grand Turk standards. I fear it's likely, in the aftermath of the storm, that Joab will be stuck off-island for some time. I must check on his wife. Teresa is her name." Holly went through her backpack. She had stripped down its contents to what she considered bare essentials. As nails, screws, staples, and other fasteners had turned out to be what was needed most often, they'd split the weight of the hardware and the tools required to install them between the three of them, though Holly suspected the men had weighted their rucksacks more heavily than hers. In addition to the tarps, new and old, they were lugging with them. "I've got 3 medium-sized bottles of water. One to keep me hydrated during the trip, the other 2 to leave behind for whoever might need them. My medical kit and some dried goods, too. Will I need anything else?" "It may take many months for the power to be turned back on for the whole island," Anthony said. "I certainly hope the governor will airdrop supplies in soon, but even that may take days to happen. We have no way of knowing what's going on here, let alone the outer islands. For now, we are completely on our own, and must be cautious." A chill ran down Holly's spine, and she prayed he was exaggerating. But one look at him revealed that a deep crease had formed between his eyebrows. "I know from a very difficult experience that people are capable of most anything when they get desperate," he said grimly. As they started walking, Holly turned Anthony's words over in her mind. She was certain his biggest concern was anyone in his care getting hurt, namely her. In fact, given the way he was now clenching his jaw and grinding his teeth as they marched along, she guessed that was all he could think about. She pushed her recent attack to the back of her mind. Someone had to keep a level head. She was sure it could be her. Anthony stopped abruptly and spun to face both Holly and Matthias. "Keep your eyes wide open. If anybody stops us on the way, stay together and listen carefully to what they are saying. Matthias, I'm quite serious now. Take care of Holly, no matter what else is going on. And, if I may be so bold, I hope I don't sound like an arse. Please let me do the talking." The view as they climbed was spectacular, eventually giving way to an ocean view on all four sides of them. Holly was sweating dreadfully under her wide-brimmed straw hat, but with her fair skin she dared not take it off. She couldn't be of help to anyone if she got burnt to a crisp. Mercifully, the higher they got, the stronger the trade breeze blew. They stopped to take a rest under the shade of a large palm tree. Holly removed her hat for a moment and put her face toward the wind, with her eyes closed. "Not far now," Matthias said. "Just there." He pointed up the road to the right. The second he said it, a man on a bicycle turned the corner. Holly's breath caught, and she glanced over at Anthony, whose face seemed set in stone. She wondered if they were all thinking the same thing. Where could he possibly be going? As far as she knew, no businesses were open. Everyone was still busy digging their shops out from under rubble. The rider waved as he zoomed past them, then flew off down the hill, zigzagging around potholes as he went. They all turned to watch him and waited until he was out of sight before resuming walking. After scanning the empty streets around them, Holly felt they were safe to continue. Anthony must have come to exactly the same conclusion, for he said, "All right, let's move along." The exterior of Joab's house had bare patches that looked like raw wounds. Its once white masonry walls and aqua shutters, still tightly closed, had been blasted by the high winds and the sand it carried with it. Much of the paint, even sections of the stucco layers, were gone. Here and there, the stone underneath was exposed. The house's enclosed yard was filled with more of the random trash and rubble present everywhere they went. What branches were left on their shrubs and trees were strewn with shreds of plastic. The group stood together by the unopened front gate. "I've suddenly got that overwhelmed feeling again," Holly whispered. She was sure the sight of all the garbage everywhere was what caused her sinking sensation. Something about it left her feeling defeated before they'd even begun. Standing there in the baking late afternoon sun, she couldn't imagine how it could ever be cleaned up. They all stood perfectly still, as if mesmerized by the mess, until the front door quietly opened, and a hugely pregnant young woman in a gauzy pink cotton dress stepped out. Well, this must be Teresa. Her skin shone like seasoned cherry wood, and her long braids were perfectly groomed. She shaded her eyes from the sun with one hand and scanned the group with a slight frown, but when she recognized Anthony and Matthias, her face flew open in a huge smile. "Have you come all this way?" Holly watched as Teresa picked her steps carefully over to Anthony. She seemed to be moving more slowly than caution required. Is she limping? Meanwhile, Anthony pushed the gate open little by little, reaching over it and clearing the garbage blocking the arc of its swing as he forced it inward. When it was fully clear, Teresa threw herself into his arms. "I have never been happier to see anyone in my life," she cried. Holly knew it was unusual that Teresa, a married woman in this particular culture, allowed herself to be held by a man who was not her husband. But hug each other she and Anthony did, with palpable intensity. One squeeze he gave her was so tight it forced a moan from her. He pulled back and stared at her. "Are you hurt?" Teresa lifted her skirt up to show her knee, which was colored with deep shades of black and blue. Holly's eyes widened. Something about the color seemed much worse than a bruise. It was the color Byron's skin had been when he broke his arm. "How far up does the discoloration go?" she asked. "Here." Teresa touched her hip and winced. "A window gave way and blew in on me. Even one of the shutters bashed in." "Did the impact hurt the baby?" Anthony sounded woeful. "Holly, please take a look at those scrapes." Teresa's mouth hung open as she held her belly and gasped. Holly began to step forward, but Teresa held up her hand and held Holly's eyes in a silent cry of anguish. She gasped loudly, but the moment eventually passed. "It seems I'm in labor, Anthony. Rotten timing, don't you think?" Teresa asked with a laugh. Her dark humor made Anthony chuckle as well, despite the seriousness of the situation. These two are longtime friends. Close friends, you can tell. I have to do everything I can to help her, a fellow mother. With his hand under her arm, Anthony braced Teresa against him. "Do you think you can walk with us, dear? I want to take you to the Roseate." Teresa didn't get a chance to answer because Holly jumped into the conversation. "No, she can't walk. It's not safe. I know what to do. I'll run back to Front Street and see if I can find a motor scooter. Byron has one around sometimes. If not, I'll go door to door." She paused a moment to catch her breath. "I'm a fast runner. I was a long-distance champion when I was young." She placed her hands on her hips, as if inviting anyone to argue with her. Anthony slowly blinked his eyes twice. "All right. I'll assume you know how to ride it. I hope there's gas in the thing. We'll do what we can here until you return, but just to be clear, I will be the one driving Teresa back. These roads are so rutted they are perilous." Despite the somewhat dodgy transportation she was proposing, Holly knew Teresa would be better off at Roseate House, and the sooner the better. She was alone here out on Micaiah Point, and as Anthony had stated so clearly earlier in the day, in this state of emergency, things could become dangerous fast. The need for food and water was a primal concern. Rumor had it the medical clinic had sustained extensive damage and wasn't functional. Extraordinary times called for extraordinary measures. They would have to try to deliver this baby themselves. There was a retired nurse who lived downtown who might be able to help if Teresa's labor went awry. Holly wondered if they could find her, should they need to. Equally important was something else. Anthony had said earlier that at some point in the not-too-distant future, the government of Turks and Caicos would send a chopper out to assess the damage, and the beach in front of the Roseate was one place where they would surely land. Perhaps they'd be willing to take Teresa back to the hospital in Provo when they did. Anthony left Teresa with Mateus for a moment and leaned in close to Holly. "I don't want you to be alone," he whispered. "Let Mateus come with you. I feel the need to stay with Teresa, because it's all I can do right now to hang on to some shred of confidence this birth will turn out all right in the end." As if he was giving himself a pep talk, he pointed out that Teresa was a healthy young woman. "Most births happen quite naturally. If it comes down to it, this will be the third baby I've helped bring into the world." Holly's eyes widened. "Why? I mean, what happened?" Anthony shrugged. "Another story for another time, love. Actually, 2 stories. Holly didn't mind Mateus coming along, but she didn't wait for him either. She took off running down the hill at breakneck speed, thinking about what Anthony had just told her. Mother of God, where hasn't that man been? What hasn't he done? More importantly, is he full of it? Or can he really deliver that baby?